So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another, hopefully, very exciting session of The Heart Within, which is centered around our new anthology, Mapping the Mind, Minding the Map. So, we had a launch of the anthology a couple of months ago, and we have been planning to have a series of events centered around it. Where we invite scholars to talk about the book, where we invite poets to read from it, and today, interestingly, we have an interesting mix of scholars and poets who will be part of this session today. So we have four scholars from various parts of the country who will talk about their perspectives on the book. And we have four poets. So two of them, Ashwani Kumar and Lakshmi Kannan, have been represented in the anthology. And two other scholar poets in their own right, Syed Ali Hamid and Jayanthi Manoj, will be reading poems from this anthology. So we are very, very happy that all of you took time to be with us here this evening. And without much ado, I would like to invite Professor Jaideep Sarangi to welcome you all, and also to talk a little about our purpose in bringing out a book like this. Over to you, Jaideep, sir.
Good evening, smiling. Good evening to all from different time zones within India and abroad. I formally welcome all of you to the platform of Heart Within, who are the first time, and all the scholars, teachers, professors, budding scholars, students, writers, writing in vernaculars as well as in English, as English is one of our vernacular these days. We are really honored that Professor Pradeep Trikha, Professor Sumanyu Satpathy, Professor Ranu Uniyal, Professor Rammanohar Pari will be speaking on the book. And the book is a bulky one, of course. And the reading, Lakshmi Kannan Madam and Ashwani Kumar ji will be reading their own poems from this particular book. And Professor Hamid and Professor Jayanthi Manoj will be reading poetry from the anthology. Jayanthi Manoj will be reading the poems by none other than Jayanta Mahapatra, and Professor Hamid will be reading the poems by Tabish Khair. We take this opportunity to introduce the book in a different light, because Indian English poetry is a confident body of literature now. Now Indians can't be said that only can write fiction or metafiction or non-fictional prose. Indian English poetry in last 50 or 60 years of time, the years of time which is mapped in the book, starting with Jayanta Mahapatra and K.K. Darwala to Shangjukta Dashgupta and K. Srilata in 2023 onwards. So 1972 to 2023, almost this 52 years of time that this anthology has taken up 20 iconic Indian poets with 10 of their representative poems, and possibly the first anthology with 10 poems by each poet, which gives the wide range of selections, the writing areas and all that. There are anthologies starting back from, if we look back, first time in 1918 anthology by Theodore Dunn, India in Song, Eastern Themes in English Verse, and which was published in 1918. And then the Bengali Book of English Verse in 1918, we all know, Theodore Dunn and Rabindranath Tagore. Then in Anthology of Modern Indian Poetry, 1927, by Professor Godwin and published by J. Murray. First time an Indian attempted for Indian English Poetry Anthology by A.R. Chinda, published in 1935, an anthology of Indo-Anglian verse. And then onwards, it's kind of mapping how Indian English poetry evolved, been represented in poetry anthologies. Poetry anthologies in 1950s by, of course, P. Lal's anthology, Modern Indo-Anglian Poetry, Modern Indian Poetry by A.V. Rajasa Rao, and many others in 60s, 70s onwards, coming to this anthology by Sahitya Akademi, actually maps the growth, development, possibilities of Indian English poetry. Why did we take 20? We wanted to make it very short. We wanted to have a balance of gender, ethnicity, geographical location, diaspora as well, and the visibility of the poets writing for 3 decades. Some of the preconditions we had to make it very clear, because an anthology is also is a possibility of other way to look at things, because no anthology can ever be definite, and that is too in a country like India. And when all we started the jobs we took up, there were a whole lot of things came to our mind when how to map this anthology and locate it, which will be truly representative of Indian sentiments, Indian myths, legends, Indian ways of life in a truest sense. And we came out with a lot of problems and dealing with, because so many people writing in poetry for last 3 decades or so, and so many of them are globally visible in different parts of the world. So many of them have good literary journals on their back, and we concentrated on that, explored on the facts, and we don't claim even today this anthology is definite, and of course only the one way to look at Indian English poetry. This is possibly one of the many ways to look at Indian English poetry, which is really a true mosaic of the Indian traditions, Indian history, Indian thought process, what Indians can only make it to be written and reflected. The introduction gives you an inroad to the anthology, and there are sources at the end of the book. The anthology, we got enormous support from each one of the 20 poets. We can remember the handwriting Jayanta Mahapatra, the poems corrected, sending us back, and all are preserved in our, of course, drawer, which are important documents and life-giving force and energy forever. Kekida is not well. Kekidarwala was extensively supportive during the course of this particular anthology. And everybody, they came up, they actually, we got into 5 corrections, proofs, and everyone is so meticulous. And after all, the end product is up for all of us to take Indian English poetry forward. It reflects the country's rich diversity, depths and vernaculars, the age-old myths, legends, folklore, bioresources, and the cultural mosaics. No one from any other part of the world can actually have all these baggages possible, because India is such a mesmerizing country with a lot of variety, which will never bore any Indian or any foreigner. It is never be a monoculture, monolingual context, but a multilingual, multicultural context like India, which this Indian English poetry is actually with some generations of English education on our back, is one bonus or one vital force for writing English confidently. I think these anthologies will take our confidence forward, and India shining, the concept of India shining is truly been executed, employed, and of course, maybe realized such kind of anthologies, and which will give us a feel of Indian, live like an Indian, and think like an Indian. I welcome all of you to this board and looking forward to the feast of ideas along with wonderful reading session. Thank you all for taking your time out. Thank you. Over to Dr. Bashudhar.
Thank you so much, sir. And I think you have very concisely outlined the idea, also the journey. And we are very grateful that we have, as we said, a wonderful panel to talk about this book, which is very close to our hearts. And in order to begin the discussion, I would like to invite Professor Pradeep Trikha to join us, to talk to us, and to reflect on the various dimensions that the book suggests to him. So, Professor Trikha, thank you so much for being with us, and over to you.
And Professor Trikha himself is a poet and wonderful, wonderful critic of Indian writing in English and Australian studies. One of pioneering members of Australian studies. One pocket about City Indira that was in Madras University, and of course, one pocket ISA under the leadership of Professor Sareen and Professor Trikha. Thank you. Over to Professor Trikha.
Thank you. Thank you, Jaydeep. And thank you for such an opportunity this evening. I mean, I think you made my day when you pulled me out of my hibernation and invited me to say something about this anthology, Mapping the Mind and Minding the Map, 20 Contemporary English Poets. Now, while going through the introduction, which is so well articulated and so well expressed, I was caught by a sentence where the Basudra says that here are the poems on history, society, politics, nature, memory, migration, myth, home, love, relationship, war, nostalgia, injustice, monotony, apathy, and humdrumness. Now, I think, this is the whole universe which she talks about. And for me, what was so intriguing about the title was that I started thinking on the lines that a poem becomes a map when it crosses the boundaries of identity and experience. And when it shows us how to move through and beyond the spaces that keep us from one another and keep us from our own humanity. The poem as a map situates the reader within the larger contexts. And these contexts are, of course, cultural, historical, social, and spatial even. It layers the personal and universal experiences, interior and exterior perspectives, and then it invites us to transgress them. Poems as maps help the readers to survey their selves and experiences. A poem can answer the question, or many questions, that what happened, how it happened, who did it, how I understand it, and can I do something about it? Can I get out of it, or can I only get into it? I'm reminded of June Jordan. I came across his book called Poetry for the People, a revolutionary blueprint, where he says that, and so the poetry is not a shopping list, a casual disquisition on the colors of the sky, sporific daydream, or a bumper sticker, sloganeering. Poetry is a political action undertaken for the sake of information. The faith, the exorcism, and the lyrical invention that telling the truth makes possible. There is a possibility to tell the truth. Poetry means taking control of the language of your life. Good poems can interdict a suicide, rescue a love affair, and build a revolution in which the speaking and listening to somebody becomes the first and the last purpose to every social encounter. Having said that, another thing which comes to my mind while going through the text of this anthology is what Plutarch had said centuries ago, that mind is not a vessel to be filled, but fire to be kindled. And I think this anthology justifies this. Since our creativity can be unpredictable, we all know as creative people, and we all are aware about the fact that repetition is the mother of all knowledge. Mind mapping can help us become more creative because it leads to a visual thinking, recollecting the memory and freshen up the ideas. The exact craft of the cartographer is perhaps least associated customarily with our ideas of poetry. By showing us how the human map maker, that is poet, his decisions have to be, and how imaginative our reading of literal map, the poem, prepares us for poetry's exactitude. It demolishes prejudice without alluding to it. The poems by Ashwani Kumar, K.K. Daruwala, Sudeep Sen, Jayanta Mahapatra, Lakshmi Kannan, and Sanjukta Das Gupta, and many others, they resemble the maps they describe in revealing most basic attitudes of their authors and cultures. One of our cultural assumption is that art and science dualism. Used uncritically, it implies that science is progressive and primarily art is immutable and secondary. Such stereotypes not only denigrate art as aesthetics, intuition, or creativity at the expense of science, as rationality, reason, analytical, and objective, and vice versa, but also their similarity in attempting to envision and understand complex ideas, theories, and data by showing what poets and map makers have in common. The poets included in this anthology bridge such artificial divides. The anthology unlocks their secrets and offer what may be their cartographic inspiration. Like any map or person's observation of nature, poems like Mahapatra's Land and Sen's Cargo, Abir Jaswala's Women in Landscape, and even Arundhati Roy, Arundhati Subramaniam's When Landscape Becomes a Woman. These poems, to me, they ensue any number of interpretation of the same facts, and the title specificity becomes a paradox. What mesmerizes me is when I look at the cover of this anthology, it reminds me of lotus consciousness, a concept of Buddhist thought. It represents the idea of rising above the impurities of the world, blooming in a beautiful and pristine way. It indicates open consciousness from above, which means that you become aware of a new plane of being, which you were not aware of before. White in the cover is highlighted through the blue, green, yellow, and red, which are the symbols of Mother and incarnating divine. Roberta Morosini, in his essay on Boccaccio, Cartography of Poetry of Geocritical Navigation of Genealogy of Pagan Gods, this is the title of the essay, he emphasizes that Boccaccio defends poetry and by sailing through the sites of myths, he turns geography into concrete cartography of poetry, where one can locate myths in actual space. There are poems on Draupadi, Kali, Lopamudra, Ahilya, and many other mythical characters in this anthology. It is the duty of the poet to invent and reinvent the stories by referring to the precise criterion of plausibility, then by sailing to places of myths. Majority poets in this anthology gave a plausible accounts of the genealogy of gods and myths, their useful inventions for the mankind. Geography proves to be the theater for this anthology and history gathering together. The poets have mapped out the spaces where these narratives or stories unfold and make them last forever. Through the rehabilitation of truths of myths, the poets like Anita Nahal, Ashwani Kumar, K. Sachidanandan, K.K. Daruwala, and others celebrate the power of human literature the power of poetry that eternalizes the deeds and civic conquests of mind, and power of geography that gives poetry a philosophical touch. So I think I tried to put together what I felt so intensely and what I could passionately say something about. So I would really congratulate both the editors and even the poets who are writing and contributing so much to Indian poetry. And I think this is the best time for poetry, and poetry alone can help us to survive in the world. Whatever is happening all across the world, I think this is what this anthology is very soothing and very comforting, at least for me as a reader. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Pradeep sir. So Professor Pradeep was talking to us from Udaipur, Rajasthan, and all the way from Rajasthan, all this love that we receive for the anthology means a lot to us. And I so much liked about, the way that you, those particular lines where you said that a good poem can prevent a suicide, it can save a relationship, and basically, this is the kind of activism that we are championing for poetry. We believe that it has a therapeutic value in the world, and good poems and collections of good poems will do something to people. So it is not just a mere act of writing, but it is also the recognition of the potential of the genre, the healing capacities of the genre that we saw particularly during the pandemic period. So we are very grateful that you pointed out to that, how these poems comfort us, the kind of grace that they offer us in their own way, and how that translates into a map of the mind. It's a geography of comfort in a way. Thank you very much. That is very valuable for us.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
from Professor Pradeep, we move over to Professor Sumanyu Satpathy, who has been teaching at the University of Delhi for quite a long time. We are very grateful, Sumanyu sir, that you could spare some time for us, and over to you for your ideas on the book.
Thank you very much. Good evening to everyone. And I must begin by thanking Jaideep in particular for contacting me.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And I'm also a bit angry with him because, I had come to Shimla to relax, but he put me into all this. Anyway, that's beside the point. I'm very happy. Fortunately, I'd spent, the bulk of my time here, and I was about to set off to go back to Delhi. Congratulations to the editor, both the editors, Jaideep Sarangi and Basudhara Roy, for having painstakingly put together this excellent volume. A long overdue volume of contemporary Indian English poetry. Congratulations too to Sahitya Akademi for the publication of Mapping the Mind, to shorten the title, as well as to the behind it, who have been duly acknowledged by the editors themselves. On behalf of the lovers of poetry, I thank them all, the editors, Sahitya Akademi, the think tank. After all, poetry does not have too many takers in today's book industry. Unlike prose fiction is ubiquitous, it's published widely, both in original English as well as in English translation. But poetry doesn't, unfortunately, find too many takers, publishers, and booksellers. So public institutions like the Sahitya Akademi need to be congratulated for supporting poetry. Before offering my two-penny worth of comments on this anthology, I would like to remind ourselves that traditionally or historically, anthologies of poetry have played a pivotal role in canon formation. And though the tradition is pretty old in the English-speaking world, it is less than a century and a half old in India. Uh, we think of some of the anthologies that were first published when different school curricula were prepared under the broad rubric of Sahitya in different Indian universities, especially Calcutta University, where Sir Asutosh Mukherjee had taken the leadership to get anthologies of these languages, language literatures published. In fact, the first Odia anthology was published by Calcutta University in the year 1921. And that was for purposes of study, for curricular purposes, different colleges and universities which are then being set up. When Indian literature in English began to be taught in departments of English at different Indian universities, a similar need was felt to anthologize Indian English poets. Because by the 1970s, Indian poets and Indian poems, Indian poetry scene had grown, it had arrived. And not surprisingly, many of these poets, Indian English poets, were English academics themselves, whether it's Nissim Ezekiel or R. Parthasarathi, some others. So Indian English poetry anthologies were put together. I will name just one of them, that is by R. Parthasarathi, 20th century Indian poets. Now, like these two editors, Parthasarathi also thought of using a round figure, 10 20th century Indian poets. Now, by 1977, 10 were too few, I think, but they had to make a difficult choice. And what is interesting about the title is that nowhere does it mention that they are Indian English poets. They're simply called 20th century Indian poets. So people can be excused for having thought then that they were poets writing in different languages too. Now, of those 10 20th century poets, only two have survived to be included in Jaideep's edition or anthology. The others are no longer considered contemporary. These two are represented here, Jayanta Mahapatra and Keki Tarwala. Other anthologies have followed since then, but in spite of the dwindling demand or dwindling market for poetry in general, Indian English poetry in particular, number of poets have proliferated, and poetry collections have proliferated too. The best thing about the title here is that it clearly states that they are contemporary. These poets are contemporary and they are Indian English poets. Between 1977 and now to 2024, some 47 years, nearly half a century, the number of poets has gone up exponentially. And the task that Parthasarathi was confronted with must have multiplied in the same way. So, it's more of a challenge for the two editors to make room for 20 poets and not the others. But as I said, anthologies are there. They are responsible for canon formation. As Anisur Rahman says in his prefatory comments, he rightly says that this anthology represents the new canon. So already we are talking about the new canon, which is very important. So you see that in this new canon, many of the older writers are not represented, and there are many new writers. As you have seen, the 10 poets in the 1977 volume all became part of university syllabi. in a sense, are part of the established canon. So that anthology and the other anthologies which followed resulted in the canonization of all these major poets. But because they were prescribed as university part of university syllabi, more than their individual collections, they are easily recognizable for the much anthologized poems in different anthologies. So this is the context in which the volume before us is so significant. Of the 20 poets that we are discussing, included in this anthology that we are discussing. We have known some of them. Some of them have been my personal friends, others are my colleagues. And I've run into one or two in different poetry festivals, literature festivals. And there's even one who is the daughter of a former colleague of ours at the department. Yet I must confess, maybe it's an indication of my own failure to keep track of the poetry scene in India, especially Indian English poetry. There are a few poets I'm running into for the first time. From the missing person of Jasawala, which does not figure here as a title in the poems, some may have been drawn from there, to Jayanta Mahapatra's missing person. This is, something that I find there is a kind of intertextuality. See, even A.K. Ramanujan's relationship and Jayanta Mahapatra's relationship, you see a trajectory of concerns common to them. From the rivers, hills, and lakes in Mamangdai's native place to the forgotten theater of World War II, that is Robin's Manipur. Here is God's plenty in this anthology, because each poet has been represented by 10 poems. So there are 200 poems, and hence I say, here is God's plenty. Even if we do not see the title of Jasawala's celebrated poem, Missing Person, the poems, that particular celebrated poem's preoccupation with cultural displacement, the clash between Indian and English culture or the culture of the first world is noticeable not only in the poems Jasawala poems included here in the anthology, but also in those of the younger of the lot, whether it is Basravi Fraser or Anita Nahal. When you look at these poets, even after 40 years of missing person, you find the same kind of concern. Of course, it's a globalized world, but the concern, the attempt to bridge the gap between the roots and the diasporic existence. Similarly, Sanjukta Dasgupta's poem about the Chipko movement. Chipko literally means to cling. It sees its unnamed counterpart in Mamang Dai's evocative poetry. Poem after poem, Mamang Dai evokes the flora and fauna of her native place, the mountains, the hills, and they appear to be apolitical, but deep underneath there is a pathos and there is a mild complaint against the kind of development that's happening around her. One of the most evocative passages in the anthology are the following lines by Mamang Dai. I will quote just 4 lines. Memory is a changing shape, flowing with these fading possessions in lands beyond the great ocean, that all is changed but not ended. How profound. All is changed but not ended. This is a theme that runs through many of our poems. Similarly, Robin's poetry from Manipur and Meghalaya is more overtly political, even though lyrical. Now, when I read Robin's poetry and the fact that he introduces himself as a lyric poet, the magazine that they launched in Shillong called Lyrics, they emphasize the lyric impulse. But I'm reminded of Adorno's essay, Lyric Poetry and Society, how even lyric poetry can relate to society and can uh, provide us with a disturbing scenario insofar as politics are concerned. So the prose poems in the volume offer us a very pleasant surprise. The contemporary reinvention of Toba Teksim by Nelima Das is my prize takeaway. The theme, the three or four stalwarts are given their due. Uh, they were contemporary in 1977, as I said. They are contemporary even now. In It is a subjective exercise to conclude the whole idea of putting together an anthology. No matter how hard the anthologists try, they cannot be objective. In introduction, these two editors have gone to great lengths to rationalize their selection. But why? I don't think there is any need for rationalizing why they selected, one poet and not the other, because as long as the selection offers us a lot of joy, the joy of reading poetry, the enterprise is justified. But I'm also slightly amused by their obsession with numbers, round numbers, 10, 20, and so on and so forth. After all, the Mahabharata has 18 parvas, it's not 20 parvas. So 10, 20, these are just numbers, and we need not be worried about them. So they must have found it hard to select one poet over another. Now, a wit asked, who is a great, even good poet? And the same wit answers the question by saying that good poets are distinguished by the fact that they are good poets. So that's all. That is the subjective nature. I consider this to be a good poem and this particular poet to be a good poet. That is enough for me. But on a more serious note, a good poet creates works that have deep meanings and last because they carry deep meanings. Another tautology, seeming tautology, but it also has its significance. Most of the poems in the anthology possess that quality, and the editors have done great service to the cause of Indian English poetry. Thank you very much.
Wonderfully said, Manuda. Thank you so much for taking the trouble, even the traveling. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sumanyu, for these wonderful words on the book, and also for endorsing these 20 poets. So I think yes, having or putting together an anthology, and especially when it is this exclusive with just 20 voices, so it's like choosing 20 children out of a class of hundreds at least, and then you got to justify your choice. So in a way, that kind of endorsement that the poems represent the poets and they are all worthy poems, despite the tautologies, they are all good poems, that matters a lot. So thank you very much for that endorsement. And we are very grateful that you liked the book and the way you put the anthology in perspective with previous anthologizing efforts. So the idea was to bring in voices who have been writing for a considerable period of time, but who have not been able to, make that kind of presence, because primarily we intend this to be a volume that will be used in the classroom, that will be used to introduce students to Indian English poetry. So these are poets who I believe have as yet not become a part of our syllabi, and they need to be heard, they need to be read for the kind of contributions that they have made to poetry, and they have been consistently writing for at least 2 decades. Thank you very much. And from Professor Sumanyu, we move over to Professor Ranu Uniyal, who is joining us from Lucknow University, a poet, critic, scholar. Ranu ma'am, we are very grateful to have you, and we eagerly look forward to what you have to say about the book. Over to you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Basudhara, and good evening to all of you. Well, you see, this is an age of excess. And in this age of excess, there is no dearth of poetry and anthologies. There is excess of everything, be it words or the world itself. And it seems that everyone is writing poems, good or bad. I'm not here to judge the quality, but yes, poets are everywhere. And as Professor Sumanyu Satpathy rightfully said, that these anthologies help in canon formation. Mapping the Mind and Minding the Map, published by Sahitya Akademi and edited by Jaideep Sarangi and Basudhara Roy, is a book with a difference. The mind and the map, the psychological and the geographical topography, has been traversed in multiple ways, and we find a range of voices that emerge with a rare blend of wit and humor, sadness and sorrow. Sublime and profane, ideas flow with candor and with grace. The beauty of these verses it lies in its ability to capture the subtleties of our everyday existence, mapping the mind, as it traverses multiple landscapes. In his poem, During Easter, Robin Gangom poignantly writes, and what does he say? On Maundy Thursday, no one washes the feet of the poor as the Son of Man washes the feet of his automobile. Is it not with a certain irony that Nyangom talks of the ritual of washing and cleansing? The opening line, the winter languishes in the street like an old man who refuses to stir, and this is followed by the act of celebration and that of thanksgiving. And at the end of it all, are we not moved by the sight of the sorrows of a lonely woman sitting outside the church? And a similar strain runs through That Friday by Lakshmi Kannan. With hammer and nail on soft flesh and then on wood, the sound thudding through the agonized crowd. Then, in the next poem, Mahaprajapati, she talks of the alpha woman who needs to be more like a man. The legend of Gautami as a trailblazer comes alive in her poem. As we move on to the other contributors, Sanyukta Dasgupta's poetry, it primarily deals with the issues of violence against women, the demon of patriarchy, how it savagely tears open the rights of women to live, breathe, and be free. Her Sita, Kali, and Lakshmi are tireless women who refuse to succumb to the pressures of patriarchy. Ready to break the stereotypes, they emerge as powerful women. Tireless, vigilant is how she describes Kali, the invincible goddess, raging like a mother of all tsunamis. I also went through the poetry of Ashwani Kumar and Arundhati Subramaniam and realized that they have a special beauty and elegance that leave us asking for more. Mitti. As a child, I ate mud, says Subramaniam. It tasted of grit and peat and wild churning. There is nothing to scorn here but a childlike curiosity. And something, she says, I could never find a name for. Here is a good example of an awareness that comes with alertness, with growing up. Navina Das's poetry often uses humor to intercept the underlying pathos. Another Toba Tek Singh is a lively experiment in verse. It hits you hard in this anthology. Explored, we find that there are diverse themes which have been dealt with unusual candor. Mamang Dai is rooted to her landscape. Arunachal comes alive with its rivers, hills, fountains, rituals, stories, tribes. When she speaks of the fading possessions, I quote, "We dwell in the mountains and do not know what the world hears about us. Foragers of a destiny, all the days of our lives, we stare at the outline of the hills, lifting our eyes to the invincible sky." Post-80s women poets who represent this anthology have redefined some of the old values and followed an interesting trajectory. Mamang Dai says in her poem, The Sorrow of Women, "There is an unquenchable fire burning in our hearts, my love. What should I do?" Ashwani Kumar writes with a natural ease of homecoming and mother's hairpin. What is remarkable is the finer qualities of sound merge with the changing thoughts. The courage to experiment with ideas and language adds to its uniqueness. As I was going through some of these poems, it's a big anthology, and time will not allow me to refer to all the poets at length, because to be able to read poets from the Indian diaspora, poets like Anita Nahal, who writes prose poems, Yogesh Patel, Usha Akela, Tabish Khair. Then we also have Bashabi Fraser and senior poets like Keki Daruwala, K. Sachidanandan. They are all a part of this anthology and have very beautifully expressed the landscapes of the mind and have tried to, focus on the issues that are linked with everyday existence. Because if there is Vibhu Pari, who probes human relationships with his genteel irony, as he writes about the unexplored spot of the mind in a poem, A Wound Elsewhere. What does he say? But not this, not this, not here. No one knows. No one needs to know. Having read and taught Dawn at Puri as one of Mahapatra's most evocative poems, which was focusing on the life steeped in faith, struggling to be at the center, devoid of color, and he spoke of the widows and the devotees waiting endlessly to enter the gates of Puri. In his poem, Sunrise at Puri on Sea, Vibhu Pari talks of the thin border of faith and how a wild game of words is played between wind and wave, and we wait. We find that when we look at most of these poets, family relationships, relationship between father and son, mother, wife, beloved, all of this creates a nest of becoming and belonging. It is significant for us to realize that poets connect through emotions. Aging and emptiness constantly bring us close to death, and it is impossible to evade the unending loneliness to fill in the absences. And as poets, we are all worried about the world we live in, and we share concerns for the environment. We want our trees to remain green and healthy, our lands fertile, our minds open, and it is sad to see the city smack of resentment, and there is distrust in all quarters. We have to realize one thing, that poets not only connect through emotions, but words are used to express the multiplicity of those emotions. And it is the lived experience that adds to our struggle. As parents, we have anxiety and concern for our young children as to what are we going to leave behind for the next generation. The rawness of emotion gets twirled in an unseemly set of correspondence that takes place between the mind and the map, that is the landscape. This correspondence that takes place between the poet and the reader, the lover and the beloved, the giver and the recipient, is often seen in the poetry of Adil Jussavala. A poem like Refuge, wherein he talks of mother and her rosary. Mother tells her rosary from 6 to 7, her 1 hour of refuge. The colors of the beads, she tells, are graded like those of the setting sun. Here is a voice that takes you by surprise with its intensity of pain, with its, with a certain amount of sadness, wherein the poet talks of the loss of faith and how faith itself is integral to human existence. The 20 poets in this anthology, with 10 poems by each one of them, reflect on human relationships, human condition, and human endeavors to make this earth a better place, a happier place. Sudeep Sen, in his fountain pen, talks of the tactile pleasure of a nib slowly caressing the skin of a page. And this is precisely what the poets have been doing in this anthology. As suggested by the editors of this anthology, a diverse and compassionate map of Indian English poetry with its plural, linguistic, emotional, and thematic inflections is here to stay. But it was Flaubert, and with his quote, that I would like to close my presentation. The artist should be in his work as God is in the created world, invisible and omnipotent. Let him be felt everywhere, but not be seen. The Indian poets writing in English have moved away from the age of imitation They are now talking of not just of affirmation and acceptance, but there is a very strong voice of resilience, rebellion, and refusal. That is, something to look forward to. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ranu. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ranu ma'am, for those wonderful words. And yes, you covered a very, very wide range. Though you said you would not, but I think you managed to mention and quote very significant lines from the works of almost all the poets whom we have represented here. And it is a joy because many of them are academicians, many of them have been teachers, teaching English for a long time. And so I think that many of us have also seen the way their minds work and how it also points to the classroom as a very potent space for poetry. Much of the poetry that, English teachers write, I think, comes from the act of teaching and comes from the classroom. So in a way, I believe it's a neglected space also. We take a lot from it, and it's also time that we offer to it. And somewhere I hope that this volume will bridge the gap between poetry and the classroom, because a taste and a distaste for poetry among readers begins in the classroom. So much of our aversion to poetry comes from the way that it is taught. So if it is taught to us in a very very monotonous manner, we develop a distaste, and such readers stay away from poetry for the rest of their lives. So we hope to offer a kind of intellectual feast, Indian English poetry, as a very delectable dish, and we have covered a wide geographical, stylistic, aesthetic range. Thank you very much for highlighting that range by reading from the works of almost all the poets represented here. And from Professor Ranu Uniyal at Lucknow, we move over to Coimbatore, and we have Professor Rammanohar Pari joining us from there. Thank you very much, sir, for being able to make time for us. And over to you for your ideas on the book.
I am very thankful to Jaydeep sir. He invited me to talk something about from this poetry book, madam. I am very happy to be here. Let me share the screen, ma'am. Can I share the screen?
Yes, please.
Yeah,
Yes,
please.
yes, yes, sir. A very good evening to everyone. I am very happy to deliver the speech about this book, Mapping the Mind, Minding the Map. I am going to share my findings of some of the writers in this book. Keki N. Darwala. Keki N. Darwala was a renowned Indian poet, fiction writer, and former civil servant. He was born in Lahore, which is now in Pakistan, but his family migrated to India during the partition in 1947. Darwala had a distinguished career in the Indian Administrative Service and served in various capacities in different parts of India. As a writer, Darwala is celebrated for his poetry, which often reflects his experiences, observations, and reflections on socio-political issues, history, and human nature. His poetry is marked by vivid imagery, precise language, and a keen eye for detail. His poetry is marked by a vivid imagery, precise language, and a keen eye for detail. Some of his notable works include Under Orion, The Keeper of the Dead, and The Landscapes. Apart from poetry, Darwala also wrote short stories and novels, showcasing his versatility as a writer. He received several awards and honors for his literary contributions, including the Sahitya Akademi Award, Commonwealth Poetry Prize, and Padma Shri, of one of India's highest civilian awards. Darwala's passing in 2021 marked the end of an era in Indian literature, but his works continue to be cherished by readers and scholars alike, leaving behind a rich legacy in Indian literature. Next poet, Anita Nehal, is an Indian Canadian author, poet, educator, and activist. She is known for her writings that often explore themes related to women's experiences, identity, migration, and social justice. Nehal was born in India and later migrated to Canada, where she has made significant contributions to the literary and academic landscape. Nehal's works include poetry collections, novels, short stories, and essays. She often incorporates elements from her own life experiences and observations into her writing, creating narratives that resonate with readers on both personal and universal levels. As an educator, Nahal has taught literature and creative writing at various institutions, in Canada and India, sharing her passion for literature and fostering the development of emerging writers. In addition to her literary pursuits, Nehal is an active advocate for social justice and women's rights. She has been involved in various initiatives aimed at empowering marginalizing communities and promoting gender equality. Overall, Anita Nehal is recognized for her impactful literary contributions, and her commitment to social activism, making her a significant figure in both the literary and social spheres. Next poet, Adil Daswala, is a prominent Indian poet, essayist, and art critic. He was born in Mumbai, formerly Bombay, India, in 1940. Jasuwala is considered one of the significant voices in Indian English poetry and has contributed immensely to contemporary Indian literature. Jasuwala's poetry is characterized by its introspective exploration of identity, urban life, cultural dislocation, and the complexities of modern society. His works often delve into the cultural and social landscape of India, portraying the complexities of its very diverse society with vivid imagery and profound insights. Some of Jesuwala's notable poetry collections include Lands and Missing Person and Trying to Say Goodbye. His poetry is known for its lyrical quality, innovative use of language, and existential themes that resonate with readers across generations. In addition to his poetry, Jeswola has also made significant contributions as an essayist and art critic. He has written extensively on Indian art and culture, offering insightful commentary on contemporary artistic trends and movements. Throughout his career, Jeswola has received several awards and honors for his literary achievements, including the Sahitya Akademi Award, one of India's most prestigious literary honors. Adil Jaswala's works continue to be studied, appreciated, and celebrated for their artistic merit and profound exploration of the human condition, firmly establishing him as a leading figure in Indian literature. Next poet, Jayanta Mahapatra is a highly acclaimed Indian poet writing in English. Born on October 22, 1928 in Cuttack, Odisha, India, Mahapatra is often considered one of the pioneers of Indian English poetry. He is known for his evocative and introspective poetry that explores themes such as identity, memory, cultural heritage, and the human condition. As a writer, Mahapatra's poetry is marked by its profound use of imagery, symbolism, and lyrical language. His works often reflect his personal experiences as well as broader societal issues, offering readers a glimpse into the complexities of Indian life and the human psyche. Some of Jayanta Mahapatra's notable poetry collections include Relationship, A Reign of Rights, The False Start, Selected Poems, and Random Descent. His poetry has received widespread critical acclaim both in India and internationally, earning him numerous awards and honors, including the Sahitya Akademi Award, the Padma Shri, one of India's highest civilian awards, and the Jacob Gladstone Memorial Award. Beyond his contributions to literature, Mahapatra has also been involved in various social and cultural activity initiatives. He has worked as a teacher and served on the editorial boards of literary journals, furthering the cause of literature and poetry in India. Jayanta Mahapatra's poetry continues to inspire and resonate with readers around the world, cementing his legacy as one of the foremost voices in contemporary Indian English poetry. Yogesh Patel is an accomplished poet, writer, and educator based in the United Kingdom. Born in 1960 in Gujarat, India, Patel migrated to England in 1976. He has since became a prominent figure in the British South Asian literary scene, known for his insightful poetry and contributions to multicultural literature. As a writer, Patel's poetry often explores themes of identity, belonging, migration, cultural heritage, and the human experience. His works are characterized by their vivid imagery, lyrical language, and emotional depth, reflecting his personal experiences as an immigrant and his observations of the world around him. In addition to poetry, Yogesh Patel has written fiction, essays, and plays showcasing his versatility as a writer. He has also been actively involved in promoting literary exchange and dialogue between different cultures, both through his writing and his work as a cultural organizer. Patel is the founder of the Word Masala Foundation, an organization dedicated to promoting South Asian diaspora literature and supporting emerging writers. Through initiatives such as the Word Masala Word and literary events, Patel has played a significant role in nurturing and showcasing diverse voices within the literary landscape. Yogesh Patel's contributions to literature and his efforts in fostering cross-cultural understanding have earned him recognition and respect within the literary community. He continues to inspire and empower writers from diverse backgrounds through his writing, advocacy, and mentorship. Lakshmi Kannan. Lakshmi Kannan is an Indian writer known for his contributions to Indian English literature, particularly in the genres of short stories, novels, and children's literature. She was born in Chennai, India, and her writing often reflects her cultural background and experiences. Lakshmi Kannan's short stories are known for the vivid portrayal of everyday life, often focusing on the experiences of women, family dynamics, and social issues. Her narratives are characterized by rich characterization and insightful exploration of human emotions. Some of Kannan's notable works include the glass beads and other stories, Ganga Kadir, the country of no compassion, and Vanamala and the Cephalopod. Her writing has received critical acclaim for its evocative prose and insensitivity to human relationships. In addition to her fiction writing, Kannan has also contributed to children's literature, creating stories that entertain and educate young readers while imparting valuable life lessons. Overall, Lakshmi Kannan is recognized as a significant voice in contemporary Indian literature, and her works continue to be appreciated by readers for their depth, insight, and emotional resonance. K. Sachidanandan is a prominent Indian poet, critic, translator, and playwright who writes in Malayalam and English. He hails from Kerala, India, and is widely regarded as one of the leading figures in contemporary Indian literature. Sachidanandan's poetry is known for its profound exploration of themes such as politics, culture, society, and human existence. His works often blend personal experiences with a wider social and philosophical reflections, showcasing a deep engagement with the complexities of life in modern India. Apart from poetry, Sachidanandan has made significant contributions as a critic, essayist, and translator. He has written extensively on literature, art, and culture, offering insightful commentary on various literary traditions and movements. As a translator, he has translated works from Malayalam into English and vice versa, facilitating cross-cultural exchange and appreciation of literature. Sachidanandan has received numerous awards and honors for his literary achievements, including the Sahitya Akademi Award, Kerala Sahitya Akademi Award, and the prestigious Knighthood of the Order of Merit from the Government of Italy for his contributions to literature and culture. Bibu Badani. Bibu Badi is a contemporary Indian poet who writes in English. He was born in 1951 in Cuttack, Odisha, India. Badi's poetry is known for its simplicity, clarity, and introspective quality. His works often explore themes such as memory, identity, love, nature, and the human condition. Paddy's poetry reflects his deep engagement with the world around him, drawing inspiration from his personal experiences, observations, and reflections. His poems are characterized by their evocative imagery, precise language, and emotional depth, inviting readers to contemplate the complexities of life and existence. As a writer, some of Bibu Pathi's notable poetry collections include Living with Lorenzo, Midnight Diary, Candlelight, and other poems and Mystic Journey. His poetry has been widely anthologized and translated into several languages, gaining recognition both in India and internationally. In addition to his literary pursuits, Padi has worked as a professor of English literature and has contributed essays and articles to literary journals and magazines. He has also been involved in organizing literary events and promoting cultural exchange through his participation in international poetry festivals and readings.
सर अभी सिविक्स ही पढ़ा रहे हैं हिस्ट्री में अब तक गए नहीं
Okay, okay, madam. What my finding from
कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन
these
ऑफ
all
इंडिया
poets?
वो तो तुमको डॉक्टर अम्बेडकर का फोटो नहीं मांगा था हाँ वो डॉक्टर अम्बेडकर का पेज डिजाइन करना था नहीं भी कर सकते हो अम्बेडकर वो चाहिए था फोटो वो पॉइंट्स उसमें लिखा हुआ था डॉक्टर अम्बेडकर का फोटो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन था तो वो चेयरमैन थे तो उस बारे में लिखा ही होना चाहिए था इसीलिए सर
Madam,
चाहिए
madam,
चाहिए नेक्स्ट फ्राइडे तक मेरा वो करेक्ट होगा पेपर अटेंड
sir, someone is talking, sir.
Yeah, please go ahead. Please,
Bashabi
please.
Fraser, thank you, sir. Bashabi Fraser is a noted poet, writer, academic, and cultural activist known for her contributions to literature and academia, particularly in the field of Scottish and Indian literature. She was born and raised in India and later moved to Scotland, where she has been active in promoting cultural exchange between the two countries. Fraser's poetry often explores themes of identity, belonging, cultural heritage, and the connections between Scotland and India. Her works are characterized by their lyrical language, evocative imagery, and deep emotional resonance. In addition to her poetry, Fraser has written prose, plays, and academic articles. She has published several collections of poetry, including Letters to My Mother and Other Mothers, Pride of the Forest, The Untold Story of Yayadi's Daughter, and From the Ganga to the Tay. Her writing reflects her personal experiences as well as her engagement with broader social and cultural issues. Fraser is also an academic with a background in English literature and cultural studies. She has held teaching positions at various universities in Scotland and has been involved in research projects exploring the intersections of literature, culture, and identity. As a cultural activist, Fraser has been instrumental in organizing literary events, workshops, and festivals that celebrate the rich cultural heritage of Scotland and India. She has also been involved in initiatives aimed at promoting cross cultural understanding and dialogue. Ashby's Fraser's work as a poet, writer, academic, and cultural activities has earned her recognition and respect both in Scotland and India. She continues to be a prominent figure in the literary and cultural landscape of both countries, enriching dialogue and fostering connections between diverse communities. Arundhati Subramaniam. Arundhati Subramaniam is a highly acclaimed Indian poet, writer, and editor known for her insightful and evocative poetry. Born in 1967 in Chennai, she has established herself as one of the prominent voices in contemporary Indian English poetry. As a writer, Subramaniam's poetry is characterized by its exploration of spirituality, identity, gender, and the complexities of modern life. Her works often blend personal experiences with broader philosophical and cultural reflections, inviting readers to engage with themes of self discovery and transcendence. Some of Arundhati Subramaniam's notable poetry collections, including One Cleaning Bookshelves Where I Live, New and Selected Poems, and When God is a Traveler. Her poetry is known for its lyrical language, vivid imagery, and profound insights into the human condition. In addition to her poetry, Subramaniam has also written essays, literary criticism, and translations. She has edited anthologies and contributed to various literary journals, furthering the discourse on contemporary Indian literature and culture. Subramaniam's contribution to literature have been widely recognized and she has received several awards and honors for her work, including the Sahitya Akademi Award, the Rasa Award for Poetry, and the International Pignogiari Prize, among others. Beyond her literary pursuits, Arundhati Subramaniam has been actively involved in cultural and educational initiatives. She has conducted workshops, lectures, and readings at universities and literary festivals around the world, sharing her passion for poetry and inspiring emerging writers. Overall, Arundhati Subramanian's poetry continues to resonate with readers for its depth, beauty, and universal themes, establishing her as a leading figure in contemporary Indian literature. My findings from this, reading all these, some of these poets from the book, all the poets are given importance to humanism, humanity. There is nothing superior than this humanism and humanity. Humanism is more powerful. These writers, poets are giving importance in their writings. These are all my findings from this book, Mapping the Mind and Minding the Mind. Once again, I thank you to Jaydeep Sarangi sir and Madam Basundara Madam. They gave an wonderful opportunity to share my findings in this wonderful session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rammanohar ji, for giving us a different look of this particular platform of
Yes, sir.
presentation. Like, thank you so much. It will be
Thank you,
really
sir.
helpful for the students. And wonderful starting with Keki Darwala citing wonderfully still now, and all
Yes,
the
sir.
writers, all the poets included, apart from Mahapatra and Tada who left us, but all are
Yes, sir.
mesmerizing soul makers. Thank you so much. We
Yes,
have
sir.
a reading now session, and may we kindly invite who inspire us always, Lakshmi Kannan. We need no introduction of Lakshmi Kannan ji, because she has been writing poetry since the early 1970s and a mentor for many of us, and writing, and she is a poet, short story writer, novelist, and what more. Without much delay, may we invite Lakshmi Kannan madam to read her poems from the anthology. Lakshmi, please. You had to wait for some time, but I understand you are not well. But please read your poems.
Now
Wonderful.
I feel well because of poetry. Namaskar and good evening. I hope I can be heard from all of you. First of all, my congratulations to Joydeep Sarangi and Vasudha Roy for putting this mammoth book together. And I lived the passion with them. And you see, they're themselves two very fine, sensitive poets. And besides that, they have this firm belief in poetry. And believe me, that is what makes a world of difference to a book. So since we are already running a bit late and there's a constraint of time, and without much ado, I'll just read what I think I should be reading, one poem which has a little bit of narrative. Only if there is time, I will read one little mini poem. The first poem I read, for those of you who would like to follow it in your book, is Haldi, page 180 to 181. And Haldi in Hindi, as you know, is turmeric, and we call it manjal in Tamil. And a little bit of introduction about that is that no kitchen is complete without haldi. And it's a curry powder. It's used as an agent in pickles and food items and ceremonies and all that. And in South Indian culture, it is smeared on all the four corners of wedding invitations as propitious, auspicious signs. And here we have, my protagonist in Haldi is a poet who is also a very, very dedicated homemaker. This is Haldi. It's not just the wedding cards that are etched with turmeric and vermilion for propitious signs. All the papers that she deals with in the kitchen, either to read or to write, inevitably get smudged with turmeric and chili powder, if not vermilion, as she bustles about the meals. The papers are strewn over the kitchen counter. She rummages through the utensils, looks around the tea tray for the poem she had drafted some time back. Now, where could I have left it? Over the micro oven, maybe? Or did she put it on top of the fridge? Was it the poem that sizzled now on the hot pan? Or has it got into that steaming milk, rising, threatening to spill over? Where is the draft that she had composed? She searches furiously and then gives up. Oh, I'll stumble upon it in much the same way I get the monthly grocery list I wrote, or the items for the children's school, or the laundry list marked urgent for a choleric husband. Why waste time searching? I'll chance upon it. She resumes cutting, baking, frying, cooking, answers the doorbell, makes it, takes the milk delivery, opens the fridge, puts the milk packets in the chiller. What next? She opens the deep freeze chamber above to thaw the frozen green peas for dinner. Ah, there it was. After all this search, that draft of a poem that she had composed many moons ago. It was dew fresh, though only a bit stained with turmeric and hot red chili powder, the color of fresh blood dried by the sun. Okay, so that should be it, and I think you should move on to the next poem.
One more.
Huh?
Another poem, yes.
Well, I have a very, very short poem. It's on page 189 for Arun. And I wrote it specifically for Arun, my husband, who passed away many years ago after having been very, very critically ill. But this takes off on the Indian metaphor of water on a lotus leaf, which we think is detachment. But actually, as Indians, we are conditioned to believe that that detachment also has a lot of involvement. So he used to, tell me, where are you going? I was doing all the work out and he was bedridden. So he would often ask me, Lakshmi, where are you going? I'm left with this paramedic and this thing. And I wrote the poem only for him to show how attached I am so that I can go out and work with detachment. For Arun, a droplet of water on a lotus leaf is said to symbolize detachment. But see how the veins of the leaf are magnified through the pearl of water, and how the droplet turns a radiant emerald on the leaf. Water and leaf jewel together, even in their separateness. Thank you very much for this chance. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Lakshmidi. Thank you so much. You are such an inspiration, and always meeting you or reading you is learning more
You're
poetry
much
about
too
you.
generous.
Thank you so much. No, no, okay.
My pleasure,
And
Jaydeep. My pleasure.
thank you. Thank you so much. And we started with Lakshmidi, now settled in Delhi, to Mumbai. None other than Ashwani Kumar. And what a tribute to Scent of Rain in My Hand about Jayanta, poems by different poets and their contribution to the all inspiring none other than Jayanta Mahapatra. The book will stay for many, many years. Ashinida is actually political scientist, poet, is a writer, and what more. And his poems and Varanasi, I read them, I come back to them again and again, each day's end. Thank you. Over to Ashinida, please. Please.
Jaydeep Babu, thank you very much, and Vasudhara for your kind words for my poetry and my craft of poetry. It's a huge task both of you have undertaken in terms of not just putting together 20 poets, contemporary poet, but also reflecting on genealogical and also linguistic journey of Indian poetry. In fact, extending the arc of, what used to be called, for me, that category is very, very suspect category, so-called Anglophone poetry to Indian poetry, and especially poets writing in English, I'm also thankful to all the speakers who have reflected on, the book, minding the map and also mapping, the vast landscape, And thank you once again, both of you, for contributing to Scent of Rain. So what I would like to do, in fact, I will read two short poems. One, if you allow me, I would like to go back to a very, very old poem, and it's about In Lieu of a Birth Certificate. It also tells you about my linguistic landscape, and it also reflects to my connection in terms of, linguistic connections. So that's about, and my craft, very old poem. It's about almost 25, 26-year-old poem. In lieu of a birth certificate, born amidst neither fame nor shame, I came to the world like a dead telegram, locked in the jail, accused of stealing electric wire. The village thief's faint sobs sparkle like my mother's sindoor, slaughtering cigarettes remorselessly. The sentry guards his conscience like a banished saint. Born amidst neither promise nor sorrow, I came to the world like untainted white charcoal. On the mud-thatched roof, skirt rolled up to her thighs invitingly, the sparrow greedily chews her daily dose of worms. Unmindful of a scorns of passerby, listening to FM radio lazily in the Saturday afternoon, the vegetable vendor searches angrily for Columbus in the discarded newspapers. Born amidst neither pleasure nor fear, I came to the world like unwashed blue jeans. At the serpentine box office queues of morning shows, adult fantasies play hide and seek like nursery kids. The last drop of alcohol in the whiskey bottle dances adulterously on my million tongues. The fragrance of your armpit travels like gunpowder in the dark forest, born amidst neither illusion nor ambition. I came to the world like the rusted rumors of a riot. Thank you. And this poem is a quite a special poem that I'm going to read. Um, I hope you like this poem. Very very Indian poem, and the title of the poem is just let me see. A Book of Rains. I'm going to read this poem, A Book of Rains. These days, I long to write a book of rains. Rains are like mural wounds from which happiness flows, speaking to us in the same tongue, but in various languages of seasons. Humming in myriad sounds of wild geese in clear sky, morning rains, morning rains of seeds of life, pouring over women in parched lands who scramble to collect forgotten love songs in pots and pitchers. Afternoon rains are old poems on a blank page, turning docile, stammering at the knife point of murderers before they crawl back into sun-roofed mud houses for untimely siesta. Evening rains, evening rains come in dancing figures, star-naked peacocks with sapphire anklet shiver in the fox's startled eye corner, the secret illusion of another sky bursting out on the distant indigo hills. Night rains, night rains are like embroidered brows of courtesans with rounded breasts, spurting incessantly into deep-throated cones, slaying fears of Leos with veiled joys from moonlight till dewlight. Amana, Amana, on my morning prayer mat sings, I am raining, I am writing, I am raining, I am writing. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. What a rhythm.
Thank you, Ashwini sir. Thank you very much for reading out those two lovely poems, very close to my heart as well, and very representative of your entire poetic corpus. Thank you very much. And from Ashwani Kumar, we move over to invite two poets, professors who are with us, who have taken all the time and trouble to join us this evening. So I would like to invite Professor Hamid from Almora, the voice of the Himalayas, to share in his lovely voice and rhythm poems by Tabish Khair. Over to you, Hamid, sir.
Thank you very much, Basudra. And first of all, let me congratulate Professor Jaideep Sarangi and you for bringing out this very important anthology. And I'm sure that this will find a very important place among all the anthologies, one of the topmost anthologies that have been produced all along. As although Professor, I recollect Professor Ranu Uniyal saying that this is an age of excess, but I am reminded of Oscar Wilde's famous quote that nothing succeeds like excess. So, so I'm sure that this will be a very successful anthology, and I give my best wishes and congratulate the two editors who have compiled this anthology with copious notes and comments. And the combination is very good because Professor Sarangi is a very well-known, internationally known poet, senior person, and Basudra is a very young person. So this combine is, I'm sure, very fruitful as far as the anthology is concerned. I have been asked to recite poetry of Tabish Khair. 3 poems I was asked to do that. First of all, I'll take 1 or 2 minutes. Tabish means brilliance. And Khair means here, I believe, the best. So this is the origin or the etymology of his name. And I had the good fortune of visiting Gaya last year, just a few months back. And Gaya is also known as Pitar Tirth, the old Gaya. People from all over India and other places also outside, they come here to perform Pitar Karma. And the Bodh Gaya, the other part of Gaya, is known for his for Gautam Buddha, where he attained enlightenment. So it's a very important place. And now, as I was reading, Tabish Khair lives in Denmark, and I'm sure and I'm convinced, as I have read his poems, that unlike Hamlet, nothing is rotten in the state of his poems. So with this introduction, I will start reading the poems of 3 poems of Tabish. I cannot resist to showcase my wit, So excuse me for my vanity. So I will start with this poem, Nurse's Tales Retold. Because the east wind bears the semen smell of rain, a warm smell like that of shawls worn by young women over a long journey of sea, plain, and mountains. The peacock spreads the Japanese fan of its tail and dances until it catches sight of its scaled and ugly feet. Because the quail cannot raise its own chicks, nature's fickle mother who leaves her children on doorsteps in the thick of nights, wrapped in controversy and storm. Because the quail will remain eternally young, untied, it fills the long and empty afternoons with sad and sweet songs. It's a beautiful stanza. Because the rare surkhab loves but once marries for life. The survivor circles the spot of its partner's death, uttering cries, until shot by kind hunters or emaciated by hunger and loss, it falls to the ground, molting feathers, searching for death. O child, my nurse had said, may you never see a surkhab die. The next poem I'll be reading is a very interesting title, Almost Sonnet. I take on the structure of the Shakespearean sonnet, and it's almost a sonnet. At one instant, it seemed to be within my grasp. Your love was a jewel I could reach out and feel. It made me come alive as nothing had before. I felt no need to keep it in a selfish clasp. I knew it was something no one could ever steal. It had no need for locks. It was a magic door. I sit here now and think of what I would have found if I had walked the way my heart bids me go. The closest word I know is paradise. But here my body's tied to a stake in the ground of many yesterdays and not one tomorrow. And though it may implore and struggle, still it lies in all the mud of language that turns doors to walls and makes the best of truths despite us false. And the last poem, this short one, The Hijra Speaks. In English, we pronounce it Hijra. In Urdu, we say Hijra. If shame is an art, shamelessness is an act. The purpose of both is to keep the self intact. In the one you learn to lower your gaze, in the other to turn a blush to a blaze. In a land where brides of shame are experts, it follows we are shameless till it hurts. Their art is required for someone decides their fate. It's a fact our act also hides. We stand face to face, we stand back to back. They bear the brunt of that blessing we lack. What divides us also joins us without fail, persistence in worlds dominantly male. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be part of this session and for reading out these beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for joining us and for reading these wonderful poems. Uh, all of these poems are very close to our heart, and we are very happy that you chose these poems to read out this evening. Thank you very much. And from the Himalayas, we move over to Trichy, where Jayanthi Manoj has been waiting for us. And Jayanthi Manoj is a poet writer, and she is also the vice principal of Holy Cross College, Trichy. We are very grateful, Jayanthi, that you found time to be with us and that you consented to read poems by Jayanta Mahapatra for us this evening. Over to you.
Thank you so much. A warm good evening to the hosts of Heart Within and the editors of Mapping the Mind and Minding the Map. And my heartfelt congratulations to you both for bringing out this impressive anthology. And my wishes to the brilliant panelists and the passionate readers of poems today and the interested teacher and student participants. This has been a beautiful evening once again because it's always heartwarming to be a part of Heart Within to experience poetry. And thank you for doing it time and again. I'm happy to read 3 poems from Jayanta Mahapatra's poems here in this anthology, an evergreen legend of Indian poetry with so much of depth and humanity in his writings. And Jayanta Mahapatra, in one of his interviews, says that his mind was always in poetry, and I quote, "I fell in love with English. I played with words, turning them over and over again until they were heavy with meaning," unquote. And that is very true of the poems that are in this collection too. And the first poem that I've chosen is The Hour, which was written after his son's death in March 10, 2018. And maybe this resonated with me as well, and it would resonate with people who have had their loved one pass over to the next world, to the next dimension, through something of what one may call in this world as death. Someone looks around for somewhere to go when my heart flutters heavily in my chest. The sick blue tuberose can hardly beat its wings against the breeze, as old men go out to sit by themselves, assuming the manners of each other. This is where the light does not belong to those passing through, to those who do not belong in the moments where the light, unable to climb onto a poem and build itself into the art of death, lies down righteously in a patch of grass. Time and the sky roil into signs of night. The prophet with his scrambled dreams loses himself in the turns of the world, and the squab pigeons fly free somewhere out there. Look down, pushing through a shadow in the air into another world. And that's quite deep. And the next poem that I've chosen is The Woman Who Wanted to Be Loved. And the word woman is a metaphor of sacrifice and suffering. And it also voices out the silent stereotype of forbearance, where over a period of time of tolerance, a woman can turn into a stone. But even if the woman crystallizes into a stone, love has the power to melt it down. That is so strong about this poem. The Woman Who Wanted to Be Loved. Somewhere, a woman's body knows. Rain is a mother, a fitful time of sweat and tears. Quietly, she dies of ghosts of love she found among the water and grass. Her dark days cannot be braided into a poem, but her body wants to escape from greater things. There was a time when her breath rose up, a flag to flutter in the wind. It was the hour when her black hair, with its long spears, needed the sacrament of blood. Seasons pass, and she becomes Stowe, size of mango blossoms, brings in the sense of summer, scentless around the bone. Love can break and still keep its promise. It can borrow a dawn and haunt it through time. That is also another beautiful poem. And the last poem that I've chosen is one of the famous ones of Jayanta Mahapatra, A Reign of Rights. I'm sure the title is refreshing because we are scorched by the sun, but the poem has nothing to do anything about the rain, but what it brings along with it. And it is quite symbolic of the identity and the evolving consciousness of man. A Reign of Rights. Sometimes a rain comes slowly across the sky that turns upon its gray cloud, breaking away into light before it reaches its objective. The rain I have known and traded all this life is thrown like kelp on the beach, like some shape of consciousness I cannot look at, a malignant purpose in a nun's eye. Who was the last man on earth to whom the cold cloud brought the blood to his face? Numbly, I climb to the mountain tops of ours, where my own soul quivers on the edge of answers. With still, stale air sits on an angel's wings. What holds my reign so it's hard to overcome? Thank you so much. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to read from the literary giant's writings. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Only the poet can read like this. Thank you so much. It has the scent of Kaveri flowing near Trichy.
Thank you.
Always remember. Over to Vasudhara, please. Yeah. You are mute.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes. Thank you so much, Jayanti, for the lovely, lovely readings that you brought in and the poems that you selected to bring to us this evening. And with that, we come to an end of a beautiful session, but not before we have had a few words from a very loved friend who is here. So Urna, who is here with us, I would love for you, Urna, to speak to us, to talk to us a little about the session today, about the book, as also to conclude with some thoughts on poetry. Over to you.
Hello, I hope I'm audible.
Yes,
Yes.
very much.
So thank you so much to all the wonderful panelists and the poets who read and shared your thoughts today with all of us. Mapping the mind, minding the map. First and foremost, congratulations on the sheer brilliance of the title. I don't know whether anyone else has pointed this out to the two dazzling editors, but in just 6 concise words, the title manages to say, articulate, and convey so much, quite like a profound poem. Mapping the mind, minding the map, it seems to me, has indeed located, found, conquered, and captured a literary sweet spot. This sweet spot is its sweeping panoramic diversity. And we all know that the word diversity is a very meaningful word, pregnant with many levels of meaning today, right? Whether in terms of work, whether in terms of the kind of content that we consume, whether in terms of our political decisions. And I don't use the word sweeping or the word panoramic in a light way. The poems here are a testament to the textuality and the intertextuality of this diversity. From Shangjukta Dasgupta's O Boishak, Arundhati Subramaniam's When God is a Traveler, to Sudeep Sen's Lenticular, Ashwani Kumar's In Lieu of a Birth Certificate. I'm so glad, Ashwani, you read that poem. Adil Jasawala's Coming Home, to Usha Akela's Ripe Fig, and Keki Darwala's history, along with all the others, we see in this anthology 20 poets bringing an immensity of poetic dictions, worldviews, sensibilities, poetic imperatives, the quality of poetic relativism, if I may say so, and linguistically pushing the envelope of the idiom of Indian English poetry in their own voices. And I think today's evening, brings to light certain things. And as readers, writers, and reviewers of poetry, we all are at some level, consciously and subconsciously, we are aware of how the boiling cauldron of diversity serves as a receptacle to melt and meld, integrate and internalize hardened polarities and sharpened extremities. And therein lies the gifts of this poetic diversity, the sweetness that we can all partake in. And thank you so much, Jaideep Sarangi and Vasudhara Roy, for bringing all these gifts to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Urna, joining from Mumbai and summing up, mapping.
I think I
what all said.
wouldn't let Urna, or I would not let this qualify for a summing up. I see another very, very dear friend in the audience, and this is Shabnam Meerchandani, who is joining us all the way from the US. Shabnam, thank you very much for spending your morning with us, and I would love for you to, unmute and to talk to us a little about the session today.
Sure.
Thank you. I agree with everything Urna has said so beautifully. And thank you to Dr. Sarangi and Roy for this monumental contribution. I also would like to comment on the absolutely resonant title. I love the idea of poetry as cartography, as words, as trails and pathways. It is so moving to me. And I also wanted to respond to something Professor Trikha had mentioned about mapping as a visualization of inner and outer environments. I certainly do agree that poetry creates sort of a ecology of perception. And it's very important to note that in this, the reader is a co-performer, a co-creator. And I would like to respond to Dr. Uniyal's lovely points by quoting Rainer Maria Rilke, where he says, looking ripens things. And as far as the visual of the lotus rising above the squalor, I really commend you on that, because an anthology is really a semiotic enterprise. How you look at it, how you handle it, how it feels as you read it is all very important. And I want to end my comments with this rather paradoxical statement from one of my favorite authors, Bayo Akamulafe, who says, knowing anything is an exercise in loss. So I feel where we human beings can engage and immerse in our unknowing, that's the most human of impulses and capacities. And I think poetry is the absolutely most resonant voice for this. So thank you for everything. And to all the speakers, I was very moved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shabnam. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Joining early morning from the US and contributing to Indian English poetry, which is the most confident body of poetry in world literature. And we are proud to pronounce it. Yeah. There is no, every syllabus and courses, we do recommend the new voices should be included and more possibilities for research on comparatives for Indian poetry in vernacular, Indian English poetry, and poetry written from other backgrounds. And for, in the future, possibilities for scholarly development of the nation building process. Thank you so much. And may we invite Vasudhara for vote of thanks. And thank you everybody for joining from different time zones, different parts of India, and contributing to Heart Within as the heart itself. We are committed to bring poetry at the heart of the nation. Thank you so much. From the Himalayas to the down south, to the west, Rajasthan, to the eastern part of India. And mesmerizing. It's what a wonderful country we are. And so pronounced is our poetry. We are all born poets. Thank you. Over to Vasudhara for the vote of thanks.
No, thanks have already been given, and thanks are more heartfelt than they can be spoken out. This has really been a very, very endearing evening, very enriching. We had rich discussions on the book, but on poetry in general also. And when we talk about what has been accomplished, we are also perhaps looking at what can be accomplished in the very near future. Probably we are together building a community of poets, a community of healers, a community of people who stand by and for each other. And that is what we hope to pass on through poetry to the next generation, to stand by and for each other. And because one does not compete in poetry, one just writes and one just reads. So that is one place, I believe, where you just be, where the act of being is maximized. So thank you very much, everyone who spent their precious Sunday evening with us. And we hope that we have your continued love and we can meet again very soon. Thank you very much. And we'll put up this recorded session very soon on YouTube. Thank you.
See you again very soon.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Take care.
Bye.
Take care. Bye. Take care.